Okay, so we've all been there when someone said something rude, hurtful, or even insulting. Many of us have faced backhanded compliments, passive aggressiveness, microaggressions, or even outright insults when it comes to working with other people or engaging with people or even being with our family, guys. We've all had those instances where we face these insults. But what if I told you that there are a couple of phrases that we can actually use to actually mitigate these or diffuse these situations and work with difficult people? Hi, my name is Mamobo Ogoro, social psychologist and founder of Gogrey. And if you want to unify across differences and learn how to unify across differences and kind of work with difficult people, make sure you're subscribing to our channel. Before we get into our magic phrases when it comes to working and engaging with difficult people, it's important to recognize that these phrases are not a shortcut to the deeper work that needs to be done. For example, when it comes to conflict management and conflict resolution, there's a lot of deep work that needs to be done there when it comes to difficult situations, especially when somebody is giving insults or microaggressions or even passive aggressiveness on a long-term basis. There, conflict management needs to be done, and there's a really great strategist that I've actually been watching his content. His name is Ryan Dunlap. Really great content when it comes to conflict management and conflict resolution. These phrases are not going to do that deep work in conflict resolution, but they'll help you. Secondly, it's important for people to do their own internal work when it comes to engaging with differences and unifying across differences. Of course, phrases will help you in an instant, but when it comes to ultimately engaging in difficult situations or with difficult people, and if you are that difficult person, don't be on your high horse. We've all been that difficult person at times. We need to do that deep reflective work ourselves to move forward. We need to increase our cultural competency. That is so important in the workplace settings to engage with differences. We need to deeply have that discomfort within ourselves when it comes to understanding our own privileges, when it comes to understanding the way we actually communicate, because some of y'all don't know how to communicate. So I'm just gonna say that, y'all. So how we communicate with people deeply, having that deep understanding is hugely essential to managing conflicts, hugely essential to engaging with difficult people and understanding how we react to those situations. But these phrases are super important to start that work and super important for you to start that development work within yourself. Let's get into it. So the first phrase is not necessarily a phrase, but it's an action. The first thing that you can do to really diffuse a situation is to take a deep breath. Okay, let's all do it together. What does that actually do? So when we are faced with any conflict, when we are faced with difficult situations, or when we are faced into a space where we are wanting to kind of freeze or do things that we don't want to do, our brains, aka our amygdala and our brains, this is kind of called the lizard brain. Some people call it the lizard brain. This is the brain, part of our brain that has been with us since the dawn of times that allowed us to survive. That part of your brain is kicked in. That's when your palms start to get sweaty. That's when you actually want to fight or flight. A lot of us have heard that in psychology. That's when you want to fight and flight. Sometimes you may just want to retreat, avoid the situation, or you may want to, let's say, give that backhanded comment right back. That's kind of me sometimes, but you want to do that. But a lot of times that does not help the situation. So what does taking a deep breath do? Well, it actually brings oxygen back into our rational brain, aka the prefrontal cortex, brings oxygen back into that rational brain and allows us to, in a moment, assess the situation. And oftentimes when someone gives you a backhanded compliment, they are wanting a reaction out of you. But when you take that deep breath, it makes the situation a bit more awkward. Kind of sometimes put them in like, ooh, what's she gonna say? What's she gonna say? So it's important for you to take that deep breath so you can put oxygen, get the oxygen flowing back into the decision-making part of your brain and allow you to add onto your next phrases, which I'm gonna say. So what's another way to mitigate these situations? Saying, say it again, say it again, say it again. Saying, say it again is one of the simplest yet effective ways to respond to an insult. Why is this? Because it interrupts the flow of the conversation and forces the other person to reflect and sometimes even say something insulting again. And how awkward is that? Oftentimes people are not expected to be called out in the moment and asked to say something again that was inappropriate or not really nice or something that they may not even have thought was hurtful in the first place. This phrase particularly is a powerful phrase because it doesn't really escalate the situation. It neutralizes it calms it down, and returns back to the person that doled out that insult. But here are some tips to actually do when you're saying it again, because I know some of y'all be giving attitude. So 1, use a calm and even tone and avoid sounding aggressive. Maintain, if you can, maintain subtle eye contact. I know this is culturally relevant, but if you can, particularly in Ireland, try to maintain subtle eye contact. Say it again. And then lastly, give them space to explain or even reframe the sentence. Stay quiet. Be like, say it again. By asking say it again, you're giving the other person the opportunity to reconsider their words, rephrase them, or even apologize. And this phrase helps you stay composed while subtly holding them to account. Number 3, the phrase, I'm curious, what did you mean by that? When someone says something ambiguous, passive-aggressive, or even microaggressions, I know a lot of us Black people have been there, microaggressions are real, they're painful, they're like 1,000 stabs, not nice to experience. But when someone says those kind of things, try this. I'm curious, what do you mean by that? This phrase works wonders because it ultimately challenges the person to rethink their statement without appearing defensive or confrontational. And it's a phrase that I use a lot. Someone says something really out there, I say, oh, what do you mean by that? Sorry, I'm just curious, what did you mean by that? It's a very useful phrase for countering passive aggressiveness particularly and allowing them to really explain themselves. Passive aggressive people thrive on subtlety, lads. By making them say their words and explain their intentions, it puts them into the light in a way that is also respectful, but also assertive. So here are some tips that you should do when saying this phrase. Use a neutral tone and try not to be sarcastic. Those who are sarcastic like me, try not to be sarcastic. Number 2 is also let them explain themselves fully. Without responding, stay zipped. Lastly, avoid adding your own assumptions to the situation because it will allow them to further themselves within that passive aggressiveness. Stay zipped, listen up, and allow them to explain themselves. Number 4, or 4, in moments of tension, in moments where people are being difficult, oftentimes that breath and always allowing yourself to cool down is super essential. So a phrase, let's take a moment to cool off, let's take a moment to cool down, let's check back in soon, is super important. Sometimes the best way to respond to an insult is saying, let's take a moment to cool off. It's a great way to reset the energy in the room and often acknowledges that what you heard was what everyone heard and put everyone maybe in the same emotional state. It allows people to take that breath, take 5 minutes and come back in. And particularly in high stakes situation where tensions are high, where people may be butting heads, it's very important to take that 5-10 minutes just to cool off, to recalibrate and come back into the room. What are some tips in cooling off, let's say? Suggest a clear time for people to come back and revisit the situation. Sometimes when you're cooling off, that may be an opportunity for you to take a step back and never come back. But it's important when you have that 5 minutes, even 30 minutes to cool off, it's important to come back and address the situation with a more clear head, with that prefrontal cortex ready to go with logical solutions and move forward to reconcile with those differences. Secondly, it's important to stay firm, but also respectful. Don't let the other person escalate it further. Don't let them bring you back to that state of fight or flight. It's important to stay calm, take your breaths, and keep moving forward. And lastly, use it when discussions are becoming unproductive. It's important when people are in that moment of butting heads, discussions can be going in circles and circles and circles. And at those moments, people tend to need a break to recalibrate, re-get the logical mind going, and come back into the conversation. And lastly, number 5 is saying the phrase, I appreciate your perspective. I know this may sound counterintuitive or counterproductive sometimes, but a lot of times when people are saying something harsh or even giving critical feedback, they want to feel heard and they want to feel understood. And in order for them to be heard and understood is by you saying, I appreciate your perspective. For example, a boss is giving harsh, unwarranted feedback to an employee. The employee may respond with, I appreciate your perspective, and then calmly and respectfully say their own. I appreciate your perspective is a masterclass on emotional regulation, and it's a masterclass on emotional intelligence. It acknowledges the other person's point of view without necessarily agreeing with it. It's a phrase that is perfect when somebody criticizes or challenges your worldview, especially in professional settings. It keeps you composed and also prevents the situation from escalating while subtly paving your response and your opinion forward. And here are some useful tips. Follow on with your perspective after acknowledging them. Stay calm. It's not about escalating the situation or even getting into an argument. It's about sharing your perspective. And lastly, use it to redirect the conversation to something constructive. A lot of times, like I said earlier, a lot of times people just want to be heard, and having that aggression and having those conversations put forward may not be the best way for putting it back to a constructive and open conversation. It's super important for that. For example, your boss says, "This work isn't up to standard." You can say, "I appreciate your perspective, and I think I'd love to show you how I've been doing my work until now, and we can see how we can make it to the standard of this workplace." Yes, it may feel hurtful in the moment, but saying "I appreciate your perspective" is a good leeway to actually sharing your opinion and your understanding of things. This shows maturity and professionalism, turning a potential negative interaction into a reproductive one. So those were the 5 ways that we can actually start to engage with difficult people. Of course, we're going to engage with difficult people throughout our lives. And sometimes you are that difficult person when it comes to different points and periods in your life, myself included. But when it comes to engaging with difficult people, those are some 5 phrases that you can start to do to support your ways of communicating and support your way of unifying across differences. Of course, there is much more deeper work that needs to be done when it comes to conflict management, conflict resolution, and there are loads of creators out there that are supporting and doing so. But when it comes to engaging across differences, that deeper work, that deeper self-reflection is hugely essential to moving forward. And in our organization in GORM, we support organizations, workplaces, and teams to unify across differences, to have those difficult conversations and sit with that difficulty when it comes to having uncomfortable and even instances of microaggression within the workplace. So if you want to engage with us, if you want to engage with any of the work that we do, make sure to contact us, engage with us, and ultimately spread that message of unity both within and outside the workplace.